The Indianapolis Colts have lost star nose tackle Grover Stewart for the next 6 weeks. Can the run defense recover? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen today. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks, your favorite co-host here on the Locked On Colts podcast. You can find my work over at horseshoehuddle.com, where, according to Jake, I'm the rootinest, tootinest film guy out there in the indie market. Jake is missing today's episode. He's been dealing with a cold or whatever the heck he's been dealing with for the last 2 weeks. So he's finally getting that checked out. You guys know how we are as adults. We wait way too long to go to the doctor to get our things checked out. So hopefully Jake is doing much better right now. Today, we're going to have a bit of a somber episode because the topics on today's show are just, man, they stink. They really, really do stink when it comes to just Colts news. We're going to kick it off talking about the Grover Stewart suspension and what this means for the Indianapolis Colts and especially for their run defense. Then we're going to jump to Anthony Richardson, likely being out for the season with shoulder surgery. That's going to be the likely option according to reports. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to try to bring it back to some positivity in the final segment, talking about this overall rookie class from 2023 and how, the early returns are actually pretty solid for the Indianapolis Colts. But again, we'll save the positivity for the end. We'll see if you guys make it that far without crying in the first couple segments. Because first, we're going to kick it off with Grover Stewart. Unfortunately, on Tuesday, we were all informed that nose tackle Grover Stewart is going to be suspended for the next 6 games due to failing the NFL's policy on, I think it was, I don't want to say steroids, but on performance-enhancing drugs. What we see typically with these types of suspensions is it's not like the classic thing you think of when you think of performance-enhancing drugs type of things, where it's like a guy shooting up with a needle like the Russians back in the old Olympic days or something like that. It's not something like that. It's more so the player took a medication that they didn't realize had a substance that was on the NFL's ban list. So that player unfortunately got suspended for this thing. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened with Grover, but according to his apology and according to some other people, what other people are saying, it kind of seems like it's that scenario. It's very similar to the Robert Mathis suspension nearly a decade ago or over a decade ago at this point, where he took pills for something else. It happened to have a substance that was banned for the NFL, and he got hit with that suspension. It seems like that's what happened with Grover Stewart. In his apology that he issued out on Instagram, he said he needs to be more aware with what's going into his body, and that is ultimately on him. But again, it doesn't seem like it was just him taking steroids like a Barry Bonds or Mark McGwire or something like that. But regardless of the situation or the facts or whatever around this, Grover Stewart is out the next 6 weeks. And that is a massive, massive blow to this Indianapolis Colts defense. A defense that I think the last 2 weeks has started to kind of figure things out a little bit more. I know they gave up 37 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but they only gave up 260 yards. That defense looked pretty solid for most of the day. A couple communication issues in the red zone, but again, for the most part, I think the Colts defense played a lot better than what the 37 points said last week. Now losing Grover Stewart, though, that's just a big hit to the overall team and also to their run defense. Grover Stewart, one of the best run defending nose tackles in football, off to another extremely strong start this year. A lot of run stops, a lot of penetration, a lot of disruption from the interior. So losing him, I mean, it hurts the run defense. You guys know what has traditionally happened with this Colts run defense when either him or DeForest Buckner have missed time. Typically the leaks get out there and guys in opposing running backs end up having big games against the Colts. I mean, we look back against the Los Angeles Rams a couple weeks ago when it wasn't Grover Stewart that missed time. It was DeForest Buckner who missed a lot of the base down, the run defensive snaps. And as a result, Kyren Williams, without having many rush yards over expected, he wasn't breaking many tackles, had well over 100 yards in that game just from the big holes that were up front from the Rams offensive line, just paving the way over the Colts backup defensive tackles. So when you're looking at the projection going forward for the Colts defensive line, this really hurts. This really hurts him. It really hurts the Colts linebackers and their ability to get through unscathed because Grover Stewart just attracts so much attention on the interior. And guys that are going to be up there to replace him, Taven Bryan, Eric Johnson, Adetomi Adebawore, those guys just aren't the same caliber player as a Grover Stewart. So kind of going forward for the rest of the season and looking at what the Colts could do on the defensive line, I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Eric Johnson in at one tech, which I think for me would be the preferred option. Put more Eric Johnson in there than Taven Bryan. But when Taven Bryan gets out there, you'll probably see DeForest Buckner switch down to one tech and play more of that Grover Stewart type of role. And then we'll see a little bit more Adetomi Adebawore at times. I wouldn't rule out calling up McTelvin Agim, who's on the practice squad, who looked really good in the preseason, a guy who has some experience in the NFL. But, when I'm saying all those names there, it's like, oh, man, they really need a run stuffer. They need someone who can just get in there and clog up run lanes or just do like what Grover Stewart can at like 50% of the level. Like that's all I'm really asking here. But I don't really think they have that guy here, because the big thing with a Gus Bradley stylized defense is they're going to stop the run on the way to the passer. It's all about disruption. It's about penetrating that gap, blowing up the play early. And if you run into the running back while you're on your way to the passer, great. Now, when you have a player like Grover Stewart, who attracts so much attention, who can fill those gaps effortlessly and disrupt on the interior constantly, that just throws off opposing run games so much. When you lose a player like Grover Stewart, and say you throw in a Taven Bryan, where your options on every play are either disruption, which you might get like once in a blue moon, or him getting blown off the ball by a double team, that obviously leads to a lot more success for opposing run games. And same goes for an Eric Johnson, who Eric Johnson may not get blown up as much as Taven Bryan, but he's just not that disruptor on every single play like we see with Grover Stewart. So yeah, the Colts run defense is going to be in some dire straits the next couple of weeks, and they have a couple tough matchups. The Cleveland Browns typically run the ball really well, even without Nick Chubb. After that, they have the New Orleans Saints and Alvin Kamara. That's going to be another tough matchup. And then, a little bit easier with the Panthers and the Patriots. But again, later in the season, when they have some other teams they're playing against, it's going to be some tough sledding. They still have the Tennessee Titans again this season, which, without Grover Stewart going against Derrick Henry, who knows what that matchup's going to look like. So, tough way to start off this show, talking Grover Stewart suspension. Hopefully he's able to come back stronger and better when he's back from his 6 weeks out. But for the time being, just a needless thing that just didn't need to happen. Losing one of the best overall players on the defense out for some time. It just blows, man. It blows. And we're going to keep this train of negativity going into segment 2 and talk about rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson likely being done for the year due to shoulder surgery, according to reports. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us this week on eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Christian Watson is back fully healthy for the Packers and set to keep making a huge second-year wide receiver impact for Jordan Love as the big play and red zone threat. Watson, before the Week 6 bye, saw 7 targets against the Raiders, catching 3 for 91 yards. He should be good to be locked into a producing role with a good chance to score of a fine matchup against the Broncos back on the road in the AFC West in Week 7. Green Bay can exploit a struggling secondary well with Watson's combination of size and speed. He also gets a terrific spot back at home in Week 8 versus the Vikings. And you guys know when it comes to fantasy football, it's all about the matchups, and those are some outstanding matchups for such an athletic and talented receiver in Christian Watson. So Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride for the first time, every time, for your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And Locked On Colts fans, football season is here, and Locked On is kicking off our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. And guys, diving into our second segment today, we're going to, again, keep the positivity rolling, I guess, by talking all about Anthony Richardson likely being done for the remainder of his rookie season. Richardson's rookie season was very short-lived, if this truly is the end of it. Only about 2 3/4 games played. Only finished one game completely, which was the Los Angeles Rams game. Technically did finish that Jaguars game in week 1. Just came out for like the last 2 plays, but still missed some time in that one as well. Just an unfortunate series of injuries. And, for a fan base that's scarred by the Andrew Luck injuries, who's scarred by the Paris Campbell injuries, obviously, some of them can be charted up to bad luck, but also you got to look at it as like, you don't want to see this many injuries piling up early on for your young quarterback or for one of your young players on your team. But Stephen Holder of ESPN did say that Jim Irsay, in a conversation with him, did say that like the surgery is likely to repair that grade 3 AC joint sprain. When it comes to the surgery on that, it doesn't necessarily mean that ligaments are torn. Actually, we've seen some good reports saying that there are no ligaments torn in there, but the surgery is just to fix that shoulder displacement, get things back to where it's supposed to go. And again, you don't want to mess with the throwing shoulder too much, because if you just try to have it naturally heal without surgery, then it could heal the wrong way. It could stay displaced, stuff like that. So they want to go in there. They want to get that fixed. They want to take it easy with him. And I think the recovery time is going to be about 4 to 6 months. So that does rule out any chance of him coming back this season if he does get that surgery. And again, it's just unfortunate because what we saw from Anthony Richardson this year is a much more developed passer than what I think any of us expected. Has had some really, really good moments, a lot of really good things he did against the Los Angeles Rams a couple weeks ago. He really flashed some high-level playmaking, some high-level ability as a passer. We saw in the Titans game before he left early, that deep shot to Josh Downs, the ripping the whole shot to Drew Ogletree over the middle. Like, there was just a lot of really good things for him as a passer this year. So maybe when he comes back next season, you lean more into the passing and kind of take away a little bit of the run game. But again, what makes him so special is that ability as a runner, is what he can do on offense as a runner. It's not worth sacrificing his body for it. It's such a horrible situation. So Anthony Richardson likely done for the year with that shoulder surgery. We'll see what the Colts ultimately end up doing with that. They still have to make that decision. They still have to undergo the surgery. We got to see if the surgery is a success, and then go from there, about getting him reworked and ready for next season. Now, I will say when it comes to shoulder surgery on the throwing shoulder, we don't have too many examples of players undergoing that on that throwing shoulder in the databases that I've looked at. I mean, Matthew Stafford is obviously the biggest example. Matthew Stafford in his first season had a grade 2 shoulder sprain or AC joint sprain, ended up playing through that, ended up re-injuring that same shoulder, which was ended up being a grade 3, had shoulder surgery in his second season, came back, and I think had like 6 straight seasons where he didn't miss a game. So he played like 13 of his first 32 games, and then he did not miss a game for like 6 straight seasons after that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he's done. Anthony Richardson's done because of the shoulder surgery, or that he's going to miss a ton of time always. It could just be a run of bad luck like Matthew Stafford had early to start his career. You never really know there. It's just unfortunate how it's come. Another player who I think has had the shoulder surgery was Matt Barkley back in college. Now, Matt Barkley doesn't seem like the greatest example because he was never really a good NFL player, but he kind of was the same player before and after. So that's all I could really say there. Kind of the same player before and after having the surgery on his shoulder. I do know that there are a lot of really good football or just quarterback experts out there. Adam Dado and Tom House, obviously at 3DQB, have worked with quarterbacks who were coming off of shoulder injuries or major throwing arm injuries, help them rework their mechanics to have just more flow there and just better feel and better movement in their arms. And these players have come back stronger. I mean, Tom House and Adam Dado made their careers off of fixing the shoulders or helping the shoulder recoveries of Tom Brady and Drew Brees and making their throwing motions actually much better coming back from those shoulder injuries. So again, just because he's having shoulder surgery on his throwing shoulder doesn't mean, oh no, he's never going to have the same velocity, or oh no, it's going to be like a weaker arm, or he's just not going to look the same. It's like, sure, he might not look exactly the same, but we have seen quarterbacks come back from this and look stronger and better, and even been healthier, like Matthew Stafford after his shoulder injury. So I don't want you guys to be too scared and too upset about this injury or this surgery, because again, it doesn't mean that he's absolutely cooked for the rest of his career. What this does mean for the Indianapolis Colts, though, is, you're going to be going into next season with your super young franchise quarterback who played his first rookie season basically only 2.5 games, 2 games and 3 quarters. Where does that leave you with that rookie quarterback? Obviously, you're not giving up on him yet because the flashes were so good and you still believe what he can do with Shane Steichen, but you have to be more wary of what's going on in that situation and like, how do you adjust from that? So it'd be really interesting to see what the Colts do there. What it means for the rest of this season, well, it's going to be the Gardner Minshew show until it's not. We'll see if he ends up being the starter the whole year. Obviously, he had a really tough game this past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he can clearly bounce back from that. And I know he has 2 tough matchups coming up, but he can clearly bounce back from that. He's a veteran quarterback who knows what he's doing. But yeah, it's going to be the Gardner Minshew show. Hopefully it's better than what we saw last year with the Indianapolis Colts and the Matt Ryan show. But yeah, it does kind of just mellow the mood for the rest of the season, because look, Gardner Minshew's fun, cool guy. I enjoy rooting for him, but it was different when Richardson was out there. You felt like you were watching a potential franchise quarterback every time he took a snap. And unfortunately, every time he took a snap, you're also holding your breath, not knowing if he was going to take another injury. So it was just, it's a struggle rookie season for him. It's a struggle rookie season for us to watch, but hopefully next year he can come back healthy, stay healthy, complete a whole season, and really grow from there. But coming up, guys, we're going to continue this talk about the Colts rookie class. We're going to transition into like an overall review of that rookie class and how, hey, look, the early returns on the 2023 class are actually looking pretty solid. Do you guys ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like you've been desperately trying to get sleep at night, but your brain just won't shut off? Well, therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. As someone who has struggled with insomnia for a lot of my life, I have tried therapy multiple times, and it really has helped me. It helps me get out of my own head. It helps me get into a better line of thinking and just understand that, hey, nighttime is for sleeping. It's not for me to be up all night worrying about the next day or past days. All I can do is live in the moment, and that moment is about sleeping. So my insomnia has been culled a little bit by therapy, and BetterHelp is one way that you can really get about that. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Again, BetterHelp is phenomenal for this stuff. It really helps you get back into the right frame of thinking. And again, therapy is not this horrible thing that you have to think about. It's a good crutch to have to help you get back on your feet. So make your brain your friend again with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. All right, guys. So going into this rookie class, again, the show has been very somber. It's been talking about injuries and guys missing time. So I wanted to bring it back to being a little bit positive here towards the end of the show and talk about this Colts 2023 rookie class, because I was watching some film the other day and I kept thinking like, man, there are so many good rookies that keep showing out for this Colts team. So I want to go over a couple of them right now. Anthony Richardson, obviously, we'll talk about him briefly. He's flashed a lot in the couple games that he did play. Has to stay healthy. Needs to stay healthy. Obviously, we can't say that enough on this show. Anthony Richardson's health is the most important thing going forward. But for him to be as developed as he looked as a passer, for him to be making full field reads that he's making, for him to having the velocity and the accuracy that I expected the velocity, but I didn't expect the accuracy for him to be popping like it did in those first couple games that he played. Obviously, the speed as a runner when he got out in space, the pocket presence, the ability to move around in the backfield and create plays down the field. I think everything that we saw in those 2.5 games is this is a quarterback who can be a franchise quarterback. Like, he has the potential, he has the ability, and he's coming along really nicely. It's just has to stay healthy. has to stay healthy. That's the most important thing. And then the development can go from there. But I think the early returns on Anthony Richardson are good. I think going into next year, there's no thought of, hey, we need to replace him. Maybe you need to get a more high-end backup or invest a little bit more into a backup. But I don't think that there's much concern about what he did on the field for the Colts. I think everything he did on the field, you're feeling pretty optimistic about going forward. So even if the Colts get like a top 10 pick, I don't think you're looking at quarterback, obviously, because Richardson showed enough. Now, if he was just absolutely horrendous in those games and the Colts ended up with a top 5 pick, maybe you look at quarterback just because that's the nature of the game. But because he looked as solid as he did, I don't really think there's any reason to even consider moving on from him. I think, again, the whole thing is just health. It's all about health. It's about putting players around him to make it so he doesn't have to do as much on his own. And again, about him getting healthy and bouncing back from this injury. So I think the early return on that first pick is pretty solid despite the lack of games played. Maybe if we just view it as, he played a couple games and he sat for the whole year instead of viewing it as an injury, then we feel even more optimistic about it there. Going to the next pick, though, Juju Brents, corner out of Kansas State, did miss the first couple games as a healthy scratch because he missed a lot of the offseason work due to injury. So the Colts are kind of bringing him along slowly. And man, he has looked outstanding these last couple weeks. I'm actually going to write something about him for Horseshoe Huddle about just how well he's played the last 2 weeks. But I am blown away by his development. I know I said that about Anthony Richardson, where it's like, oh, I didn't expect the accuracy. I didn't expect him to be at the level he's playing at. But for Juju Brents, I think everything's looking so smooth and comfortable, and he's looking so good at the line of scrimmage. He's been physical. He's been confident. He's been really riding these receivers. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley, I can only count a couple of catches that he allowed to each of those players. And those are two really good wide receivers. And even in doing so, he only had one penalty in the last 2 games, and illegal contact against DeAndre Hopkins, which was a little bit ticky-tack. But overall, through 4 games played this year, again, just through 4 games, only 3 starts, he has 24 tackles, 3 pass breakups, an interception, and a forced fumble. So basically, he's getting a turnover once every 2 games, and he's getting a pass breakup nearly every single game he's playing. Just playing at a really high level right now. I didn't expect him to be the guy who was going to be trusted in those isolated situations, but the Colts are putting him backside against Hopkins, against Calvin Ridley, against top receivers for other teams. Are putting him on that backside on an island and saying, hey, win at the line of scrimmage and win this route. And for the most part, he's doing it. Like, again, there are some plays here and there where he could be a little bit better, but he's doing it. He's playing extremely well right there on that backside. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but it reminds me a lot of when I was watching some like Richard Sherman type early career stuff and watching how he looked in practice and how he looked in his press technique. It looks very similar, which is how strategic he is in his steps, how physical he is throughout the route, and how he's using that length to his advantage. It looks a lot like a Richard Sherman type early in Sherman's career, just how he was winning as a corner. So I'm really high on Juju Brents. I think this last game against the Jacksonville Jaguars was simply fantastic. I can't think of many issues I had with his game whatsoever this past week, outside of him getting a little banged up in the third quarter. But Juju Brents, the stock is flying up for him right now. I'm feeling really good about his development, and I think the sky. I honestly, I think his ceiling's higher than what I expected going into the year, because the way he's moving out there, how explosive he's looking, and how he's winning at the line of scrimmage. The long speed issue I'm not as concerned about right now because he's winning so comfortably at the line of scrimmage. So I want to see if he continues this going forward, especially as receivers get more film on him. But Juju Brents is playing some really good football right now. And then obviously Josh Downs, a 3rd-round pick, slot receiver out of North Carolina. You guys all know he has been a really, really big contributor for the Colts. Last 2 weeks, well over 100 yards combined. His first touchdown, nearly had a 100-yard game against the Tennessee Titans. Just some really, really good football from Josh Downs. He emerged early in the year as more of their underneath guy, a quick win wide receiver who we're going to isolate him in situations, let him beat his defender one-on-one and get those quick, easy separation targets underneath. But we've seen his role kind of expand a little bit the last couple of weeks. He's getting a little bit more downfield shots. Obviously, against the Rams, he had that seam shot that Richardson hit him on down the field. He had that other one against Tennessee Titans, that deep corner route against cover 2, where he found that hole in the zone and had a big gain down sideline. Has had a lot more run after catch opportunities in recent weeks, had a drag route that he took for 20 plus yards against the Tennessee Titans as well. And then his first touchdown, obviously you go back to that quick win separation that touchdown this past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They just isolated him on the backside and said, hey, run your option route, read the leverage of the defender and get open. And he did and got his first touchdown. So Josh Downs, the early returns on him are extremely high right now. He might never be like a top 10 receiver in the NFL, top 20 wide receiver in the NFL, but he's going to be a consistent player who gets a ton of catches, who gets a lot of run after catch, and, in the red zone can use that separation to score touchdowns. So Josh Downs, really, really good returns so far, on pace for a really strong rookie season, and looks to be one of the best picks of the Chris Ballard era. Honestly, it looks like one of the best value picks he's had at receiver like ever for him. And he usually misses on wide receivers. So getting Downs in round 3 and seeing what he's doing already, I think is a really good return early on. Now, when we go to day 3, again, when it comes to day 3, a lot of these are shots in the dark, and you're taking shot on upside, taking shots on special teamers, you're taking shots on guys that might be good down the line for you. So it's hard to really hit on day 3 picks, but Blake Freeland's played a little bit this season, the tackle out of BYU. The returns haven't been amazing, but hey, to even have a rotational tackle that's playing at least close to adequate football is a positive development there. Will Mallory has flashed in the couple snaps he's had this year, the big 43-yard catch back in week 2. I know a lot of other guys on day 3 have been injured, but again, when you're getting production like they're getting right now from Juju Brents, from Josh Downs, and when Richardson was healthy, what they were getting out of Richardson, that's looking like a really strong draft class right there for the Indianapolis Colts. Like, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself right now, but Juju Brents and Josh Downs look like key contributors going forward for this Colts team. They look like 2 players who are going to be around for a while and play some good football for the Colts going forward. So I'm really high on this 2023 draft class. Obviously, it all comes down to Anthony Richardson getting healthy and staying healthy, but I'm really high on this Colts draft class, and I think that they can do some good things with this group of players. Again, as long as they stay healthy. But Juju Brents, Josh Downs are playing some great football. Richardson has flashed. And then Freeland and Will Mallory have done some things too in their limited times. But I think that's all we have for today, guys. Again, every day we'll be back tomorrow with Locked On Crossover Thursday with the Cleveland Browns. We're talking all about this Browns matchup and if the Colts can actually score some points against the best defense in all of football. So if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Kicks 2, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here bright and early tomorrow morning.